how do you cope with kids who cannot read a multi-syllable word? Are you interested in this problem? Then you're in the right place, because I want to talk about how to quickly get kids over that hurdle of attacking multi-syllable words. Welcome! I'm Dr. Marty Ginsberg of Reading Simplified, and I'm so glad that you are here tonight. We're starting a little later because there was a meeting that soccer mom had to be at. But I'm still going to be talking tonight, as we always go live on Tuesdays around 8 p.m. Eastern, to share how we can simplify reading instruction, streamlining it, and also seeing our kids accelerate their reading achievement. So thanks for being here. Hey, Jennifer, thanks for saying hi. That's so awesome to get that encouragement. If you are popping in here live, let me know where you're from and what you teach. And let's also start talking tonight about multi-syllable word blending or word attack. Awesome, Jennifer. That's sweet to say. Thank you. So, recently, many of you who have been following us here at Reading Simplified have been participating in a challenge, the 5-day challenge, Level Up Your Reader's Achievement, where we worked on just one activity called Switch It. And in Switch It, kids get super strong at phonemic segmentation and manipulation, moving sounds in and out of words, and they learn letter sounds, and they learn sound-based decoding, and they get even better at their spelling. But it's not really how to attack an unknown word. It gives you the tools to do it, but it's not the next level up that you need to be able to attack an unknown word, which is really blending, putting the sounds together. So last week we talked about the key activity and the key decoding strategy that we teach here at Reading Simplified, called the activity is read it and the strategy is blend as you read. So I'm going to do a brief recap of that and then move into how we take it to the next level and blend as you read by chunk for multi-syllable words. So tonight we're all about multi-syllable words. If you're just popping in and you have kids with multi-syllable word problems, let me know what they are. Do you have questions about your kids' multi-syllable word reading? I'd love to talk about it tonight. And so let's move first from the foundation of multi-syllable word reading, which is blend as you read. We'll move from there quickly into how to do a blend as you read by chunk. Awesome, Jennifer. She is in Phoenix teaching first grade. I didn't remember that. So for blend as you read, in the read it activity, first we give kids a word. You often just write it on a dry erase board. So maybe they're reading 3 sound words or 4 sound words. Say they're reading 4 sound words. This is a little hard because it's got the consonant cluster at the beginning. So we cover up the end of the word and get them to put the 2 sounds together at the beginning. Okay, put those first 2 sounds together. So they are blending as they read. So they should say full, and then we reveal more, and they should say flat, and then we reveal the end, and they should say flat. This is in contrast to what a lot of reading programs teach, which is sound, 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 then what word? Which would be done like this. And then the kid says the word flat. Except when they can't do that because it's too hard for their brains, and so they say something like ton or fat or all sorts of funny things, right? You've seen that. And so that's the reason that the blend as you read approach is designed to prevent that problem for those kiddos who have maybe challenging phonemic blending problems or short-term memory problems. All of those reasons may be why they can't just go flat. Okay? So this is blend as you read. After they have read it, for the read it activity, then we also get them to write it. This is another reinforcement of letter sound knowledge, another reinforcement of segmentation, and it's great for spelling too. So let's just see that this is what the child would now do after having read the word. The child would write t. And then the last step for the child is to say the sound again, another reinforcement, and erase. Okay, so that's a super fast review of how to do the blend as you read strategy and the in the context of the read it activity. However, that's just 1 syllable words, right? And it's kind of It's easy compared to dealing with a word like intrepid or irresponsible. So how do we handle that? Welcome, Stella. I'm glad you're here from Boston. Okay, we've got almost either end of the country. Who else is here? I'd love to hear from you guys. And Jennifer is saying that she has a group that have been in intervention all year, and she does the sound by sound. They haven't made much progress until she started the blend as you read with them, and now they are reading CVCC words with ease. Woohoo! That's awesome. Yeah, sound by sound is what so many reading programs recommend, and it works for a good chunk of our kids. Probably 50, maybe 60, 75% of kids can probably quickly figure the things out with this approach. However, you don't know when you get started in kindergarten, first grade, who's going to be successful with that approach and who's not. But this approach that I just showed, the blend as you read approach, which Jennifer's talking about, I've never had a child that it doesn't work with. And I've worked with a lot of struggling readers over the past 20 years of all ages. And so I think if you start with this approach, the blend as you read approach, it will serve you really well and it'll avoid that problem. Sorry about the phone. Okay, so that was blend as you read and the read it activity. And now we've got the question of how to handle them by chunks. Welcome, Leah, another New Englander. So you do the same thing that you do with read it for the one chunk word, except now you're just going to break up the chunks or syllables. I use the term chunk as an alternative to syllable because it has a little bit more meaning for a child than a syllable. So I say, we're going to read one chunk of sounds at a time. And you start with a fairly easy word. Maybe this isn't the best one, but 2 chunk words. I say, okay, first we're going to read, you're kind of moving up a level. You're going to now not just read 1 chunk words, you're going to read 2 chunk words, but we have to figure out what the first chunk is before we read the second one. So this is where we are blending by chunk. So first the child's going to put the sounds together here. Pre. Okay, what do you have? Pre. And now what's the last chunk? Tend. Okay. Tend. What did you have at the beginning? Pretend. What's the word? Pretend. So that is how you coach them initially to blend as you read by chunk. And then this is also an opportunity to say, hey, we're moving up a level again. Not only are you reading by chunk now, big 2 chunk words, you're going to write by chunk because they've moved up in their progression as in their ability to attack unknown words. So we don't want them to be segmenting every single sound from now on because it'll be too tedious and not very helpful particularly for many multi-syllable words like irresponsible. We wouldn't want them to go I'm not even sure I did it right because that's just too many sounds to think of. Instead, we want them to say the chunks as they write them as chunks. Okay, so instead of saying p-er-e, they would say pre. Do you see it's a subtle difference, but it makes a big difference for them as they advance as writers and spellers. And I bet many of you do that. For instance, when you say the word Wednesday and you're writing it, do you kind of write Wednesday? You say them as you write them. And then the same thing here with pretend, the ending chunk. Pre, okay, what's the last chunk? Tend. Okay, so they've written the word. First the teacher read it, the student read it by chunks. Now the student has written it by chunks, saying the chunk of sounds as she does it. And now she should erase by chunks. So instead of erasing p-er-e, she erases pretend. Oh, there goes down goes eraser. Okay, so you're following with me for how to do multi-syllable blend as you read or blend as you read by chunk. So are there any questions so far? That was just the initial introduction to that activity and to that strategy. Then you do it this way on the whiteboard where they see it broken up by chunks. And you can also then move them to 3 chunk words, or you can take away the chunk and have them have to figure out where to chunk it. And then you also move them into reading it into real books. So let me show you an example of some of the resources that we provided the Reading Simplified Academy, and this is just how you might see some words chunked to make it easier for kids. So here we go. This is the multi-syllable read it. There I am, hello. Introductory packet. And the first time you're introducing this, you coach them through how to do it. And so notice here, down here at the bottom, you have the words broken up by chunks, inside and cabin. So this is the early stage of coaching them through this process. And then maybe they would get some practice of doing it. Little, notice how little is written, lit as a chunk and ul as a chunk, run as a chunk and ing as a chunk. And then after they read run, ing, they would write the first chunk in the first column, run, and then the second chunk in the second chunk column, ing, against connecting them. So we're advancing their abilities as readers and writers. And notice also that we're not breaking these chunks up by the syllable rules, because syllabication was not invented for the purposes of teaching reading. So a dictionary might break up little like this, L-I-T and then T-L-E, but that implies that there's 2 t sounds, lit, tul. But when we say lit, tul, we don't say t twice. The t is actually, the 2-letter t is represented by 1 sound, so we want to keep it together as lit, ul. Now it could either be little or it could be lit, ul. It really doesn't matter, whatever the child hears that makes them produce a word in their reading. And then when they write, it's really important that if they say lit, that they write lit, ul. And we don't want them to say lit, but only to write li. So just make them align it. Does that make sense? Leah asks a brilliant question. Perfect question, Leah. Let's see here. She is asking, how do they know how to chunk the words? Absolutely. That is tricky. What happens first is that through practicing the words with them already chunked, either on a dry erase board or on paper, they get the hang of it in general, and so they try something, and in the context of reading, they often can figure it out. And if they can't figure it out, then the teacher is there to coach them to try a different chunk. So if you have seen us talk about how to coach kids through any kind of advanced phonics errors before, for instance, if they went to this word and they said brown, which is a reasonable choice, isn't it, for that picture? We would say, well, you're close, but what else could this be? So we're asking them to flex the sound, pull out the O and plug in the ow to make the word brown. So we're just coaching them on the one thing that they didn't get right. So what if the student came to the word pretend and first read it like this, which is reasonable? That could have been it, pretend. And they're like, pretend? That's really hard. And so what you can say is, well, let's try a different chunk. What if the chunk was like this? And they almost will always flip into changing the vowel from pre to pre-ten, and then they'll get it. So just like we're asking them to flex the sounds by giving them the one cue that they don't, one piece of information they lack, we will similarly say, well, what other way to chunk it can you find? Or sometimes we just use our card and cover up the part that's misleading them. That's right. Jessica says, wouldn't it be open syllable if they wrote it as little? Well, we don't worry too much about the open and closed syllables here at Reading Simplified because we don't find that that's necessary knowledge to be able to access the code if you provide them the information that, or the strategies that they learn with the activities, switch it, read it, sort it. Those core activities here at Reading Simplified. Once you carry them along with the blend as you read approach and ask them to learn how to flex the sounds and words, they figure out a lot of the code really quickly on their own. And so the open or closed element of it is not really important. But you're probably technically right about that. But we're really mostly focused on how to get them quickly developing their ability to decode. But and so the rules that a lot of traditional phonics programs have developed, they can often be an extra step that's unnecessary. So I want to show you a short example of a young, well, he's a third grade student. He's struggling with his reading, but he is going to attack a word, the word position. So this is a super short clip just from reading in a real text. But what I want you to notice is he is getting coaching from the teacher by covering up the chunks, and he does the work of figuring almost everything out himself other than seeing the chunks laid out for him. So notice how much he figures out using with the support of the chunking and the support of the context of the text. So this text is a book about Alexander Hamilton, and it is about the early American history. So he figures out a word, the word position in this example. Okay, Jennifer, that would be fine, but it's just then throws in the little variable. Then you have to start teaching your kids this is an open syllable, and why would we do it that way? And I find that if they hear little and they write it little, and then they're off to the races, and it probably doesn't matter because the activity, here, let me show you. Right here, this is about quickly decoding and writing and making the connection between sound and symbol really quick so that they see how our code works, but I understand a different approach. So let's zoom back into this one little snippet that I was going to show you about a boy trying to read the word position, and notice how the teacher supports him with the chunking, but he does all the rest of the playing around with the sounds. He's flexing sounds in and out until he comes up with the word that he knows, because he's searching for his a word that makes sense based on his oral vocabulary. Try O.
Post it.
No. Pose. Put it together.
Position.
So they had built 10 barriers to protect their
position.
Nice.
Number 9.
All right, did you catch it? It was super fast, but the teacher didn't really give him much direction other than to tell him no, and she repeated what he said initially to get him through the first two chunks, but he put the first two chunks together. And then she revealed the shun so he could figure out the rest of it. And he happened to already have recognized the shun because he's seen enough words that was like a unit, a chunk that was pretty quick for him. So are there any questions about that? That is just a short snippet of how to advance your students into the multi-syllable level, learning the blend as you read by chunk strategy. We use it in word work with the read it activity, and then it goes naturally into reading new text in guided reading of a new text. And it's so important that we coach our kids on how to attack the word that I really encourage you in your small groups to take turns with your students and listen to them read and coach them individually. So say if you have a group of 5, have the other 4 watching while one student reads a sentence, and you kind of have to keep scanning them to make sure their eyes are on the paper. That student reads the sentence, works through a word like position, and then it's another child's turn, so they get enough movement so that they're always having to be on point, and their eyes are on text to know where they are. but it then gives them that practice. Because really what's happening in that video with position, it's nice that he's learning the word position, but what's happening is building a foundation for how to attack unknown words. It's much larger than the specific word. Every time the teacher gives him feedback on how to approach a word and to be very meticulous in noticing the chunks, that is a skill that he will apply to other words. He will be able to read indefensible in a few weeks because he read the word position. He just will keep upping the ante of his ability to blend as you read by chunk with this process. So when you're giving that extra effort to focus on building a kid's decoding ability, their word attack, with just individual words, it's not just about the word position. It's about the skill of blending by chunk that will be an expansive skill that will provide them the ability to read words for the rest of their life. You and I are still probably using this skill. If we come to a funky medical term or some new psychological term or a term from another language, we're going to probably break it up by chunks, blend them together as we go, and then play around with the sounds and the chunking to see what might be a real word. And when we move on, once we found something that makes sense. Jan says that it's a good reinforcement from the teacher and the use of the card. The card is so essential, but you just can't do it if everybody's reading silently. So if you can get the situation in your small groups where you have the opportunity to give feedback to kids on how to decode, I think they will really be surprised at how geometrically better their decoding will become. And Leah says what to do about those tricky words. Absolutely, they are there. I don't even asterisk. Isn't that bizarre, right? We kind of say asterisk because we're kind of sloppy with our language. Well, first of all, don't let the tricky words trip you up because they're not very frequent. They're very rare. So if a student was coming upon the word tongue, let's see. I got to think about it because first what you do is you pay attention to the sounds. Okay, tongue. What is actually the Okay, so they come here. So let's get the first part of that word started. And this is the and then you would say, but this whole thing is crazy. This is all the okay? Very odd. I don't know of another word like that. Maybe there is, but frankly, you won't see very many, but they can put it together with that much information. Tongue. And then they would write it tongue if they were doing the read it activity. It's a strange word. It kind of looks like tongu, right? But reading it actually, what happens, which is so cool, once you give your kids a strong sound-based decoding foundation through switch it and read it and sort it, and they're getting decoding support in guided reading of new text, they'll get to this much. In the context of a sentence, the dog was wagging his, and they're off to the races. They have already figured out it's tongue. So the tricky words are there, but don't let them make you too nervous about how to cope with them, if that makes sense. There is no switch it word for tongue. Some of you may be more expert at linguistics. Can someone think of another word that's like tongue with a N-G-U-E? Okay, are there any other questions about how to play read it? Okay, Jan wants to know the foundation for decoding. Okay, we talk about this all the time here at Reading Simplified, Jan. Mostly there are 3 core activities that we teach that build up the sound-based decoding for any reader, whether they're beginning or if they're strugglers. And those activities are switch it, read it, and sort it. Now, at the beginning of this video, I just showed how you do read it at the 1-syllable level, and then I introduced read it at the multi-syllable level. So that's one of the 3 core activities. If you scroll back into this feed here at this Facebook page, you can also find lots of videos about switch it. So that's another core activity. And then in the coming weeks, maybe I should share more about sort it, which is how to handle advanced phonics. So those 3 activities, they build up a strong sound-based decoding foundation. And when kids have these skills of hearing individual sounds and words and knowing how they map to print, then they start to read more and more quickly. They attack more and more words, and they stick because they have the sound symbol connections in their brain. They don't understand how each sound relates to particular symbols, then words don't stick, or they don't stick as well. Okay. Plague. Ooh. Jennifer came up with a tricky one. That one is a little bit more similar though. G-U-E. That's like in guess. Well, never mind. That's not right. But that's different than the But that is a tricky one and very rare. That's right, Jennifer. Yeah, you said, yeah, there's no N. So should each student have a small card? I don't find that they typically need it, but if it helps your kids, that's fine. It kind of is more of an individual thing. I definitely use it as a teacher because when I try to cover stuff up with my finger, it's just too big for many books. So a card is super helpful. Meringue. Ooh, Jennifer, you're a wordsmith. Meringue. Yeah, that's the same sound, right? Meringue. The is 4 letters. That is funky. Okay. So Diane is asking about a good source of word lists. So I don't know about that one that's international. Diane, we'll have to keep looking for that in the Reading Simplified Academy and the Teacher's Lounge. Bring that up. Okay, so Jennifer says her kids each have their own card and they love using them. So that's cool if that's working for you. Absolutely. I have seen some kids that want to just be just like the teacher, and so that makes sense. That's great. So the main takeaway here is that once you've built up the foundation for helping your students blend as you read one syllable word, then you can up the ante pretty quickly. It doesn't take too long for them to move to that next level. Help them blend as you read by chunk with 2 chunk words, and then do 3 chunk words and 4 chunk words, and then also take away the chunking. So they have to figure it out where to break it themselves. And every time they figure that out, they're learning more deep down and subconsciously about how the code works. They're flexing sounds in and out, flexing the chunks in and out, and they become very strong word attackers, which opens up the world of print to them more and more rapidly. So stay tuned. Maybe next week, should we branch off into more in-depth on sorted? We'll see what's the next core thing that you guys are asking for that sounds to be a good need for you. But we go live every Tuesday, usually around 8 p.m. Eastern. And if you want to know more about that core strategy, I forgot to mention this. Let's see here. The core strategy I talked about, how to blend as you read, that's here. We talked about it last week, but you can find it at readingsimplified.com/1-and-done-nearly. Because really, if you learn the blend as you read decoding strategy, you're almost done with your decoding strategies. The next one would be flex it, which we talked about a little bit here, and that's about it for having a good, strong decoding strategy for word attack. The rest of it is developing phonemic skills and learning a lot of phonics knowledge and practice. So thanks for being here. And if you found this helpful, feel free to tag a friend and make sure you are following us here at Reading Simplified by turning on your notifications. And one last comment from Naomi. It seems okay to let kids guess the chunks when they are under the close guidance of a teacher, but most of the time they'll be reading independently. Okay, so the rules are not very reliable, Naomi, so we want them to be practicing the flex it strategy when they're on their own. If they're on their own, then give them a text that's easier. The text that this young boy was reading in the example, if he was on his own, I wouldn't have given him that because it had every other sentence had a multi-syllable word that he could have probably benefited with my help. But a lot of those words they can figure out on their own. You can be amazed at what they can figure out of their own if it's in their oral vocabulary and they've been developing this sound-based decoding approach. So I would say instead of teaching them a rule that they have to add as another explicit thing to go through, we want them first to go through what word am I thinking of that that fits the context, and that's a meaning-making part of their brain. Syllabication rules forces them to go through a series of steps, a process. So the rule is if it's open, then I use a long vowel, and that is a series of steps that takes them away from making meaning. And that's why this approach of the blend as you read, and the flex it seems to make readers faster. Multi-syllable packets available are, yes, the multi-syllable packet that I showed you tonight is something that is part of the Reading Simplified Academy. I don't believe that I have that yet on my site as a freebie. We do have a few freebies like the one that I just have there on the screen, but most of the resources that you need to be able to teach the beginning part of multi-syllable instruction and text to read are provided inside the Reading Simplified Academy. So again, you guys, let's see if I can get the right toggle. There we go. I'm so glad that you were here. Share with your friends and ask me some questions if I didn't answer them so that I can help you and some of your colleagues in the next few weeks as this goes out and is watched by others. Thanks for being here.